Katie, we are live. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. So I don't know what we're going to do with this. It depends how good you are today.
Okay.
But we have the No Fear podcast, and you look really fearful. So that's great because it is the No Fear podcast. And then we have a new thing we're coming out with. What's the name of it, Adrian? No One Special?
No One Special.
Yeah. So we have a new kind of series coming out, No One Special, which is supposed to be tongue in cheek, because a lot of times, like, I get a lot of messages or emails saying, "Hey, I got some thoughts on this," but let me preface this by saying I'm no one special. So people, like, that's their segue in to share an idea or a thought or a question for me, is like, "Hey, I'm no one special." And I always tell people, "Oh, you're the VIP in your life. You're the VIP in your family." And that connects to our whole "be your own bodyguard" metaphor, is like, who are the protectors of your family and your loved one? Something happens to you, can't protect them, blah, blah, blah. So, we're launching that. So you may be the first person on this series, although I think your background is very special. Real quick, for people who don't know you, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and then talk a little bit about, of course, your martial art, your fight experience and stuff.
Great. So I am the program manager for self-defense at Combat Sports Academy in Dublin, California. It is a world-renowned gym. Coach Kirian is best known now as a fight coach, because we have everyone from a very large and active amateur fight team, people just doing their first smokers, to pro world champions in Muay Thai. We have people in the UFC, Bellator, Lion Fight. So we're very active, very competitive fight gym. But before Coach K was a fight coach, he did a lot of work with defensive tactics, Department of Defense. I started off as a Kravist with him in his Krav Maga program before he owned his own gym. I ended up fighting in Muay Thai. I was a national champion. I was on the 2009 IFMA US team. That's the world competition, because there's no Muay Thai in the Olympics. But I ended up circling back to being interested in self-defense because I liked coaching people better than I liked fighting. So that took me to teaching Krav Maga, which is the bulk of classes that I've been running in my time as an instructor. But we've become a Blower Tactical affiliate. Coach K has had a beautiful relationship with you since before he was Coach K. So it's always informed his perspective in teaching about fear management, not just as fighters, but as human beings. Also how you approach self-defense and managing ego and apathy and everything else. So a lot of light bulb moments that I had listening to him as a coach, I ended up discovering were light bulb moments that I ended up listening to you as a coach. So it's really a beautiful thing to be able to circle back. So what I identified as as a Krav Maga instructor and practitioner, I've been very fortunate to be able to, I teach instructors how to teach now. I'm on the Krav Maga Alliance Professional Committee, which is responsible for talking about curriculum changes. But there's a gap that we're not addressing. And I think that BTS and the Spear system is going to make people have better gyms and have safer students. And it's already beginning with mine. And I really, I want people to be more open to seeing the benefits of it. And it's difficult because they create this false dichotomy that you can't do both. I'm doing both.
Right.
And it works really well for me. So
let me jump in and interrupt there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, from your perspective, and last year you kind of won a special award also as an instructor, didn't you?
Yeah, I was the 2017 Krav Maga Alliance Instructor of the Year.
Nice, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So you've been training with me directly, and as well through some of my top instructors for a few years now, through CrossFit Defense, CrossFit Spear, PDR, and then some of the BYOBs that we held at CSA. What's some of the, we call them light bulb moments, those little, when you refer to gap. Do you have any specifics of like what you saw was like the gap that we filled?
So, there are a number of places. Emotionally, where it hit me first was I had an experience with a student who was at a bar after a sports game and accidentally bumped into some guy, and the guy gets irate. He's been drinking. He gets really aggressive. And my student actually did the intelligent thing, and he tried to leave. And he tried to walk away. But as he exits the bar and starts walking towards his car, the guy follows him outside, and he's hurling invective. And he turned around and he put his hands up in a fighting stance. And what he didn't see was that the guy's friend was standing outside as well, and sucker punched him in the back of the head, and he got jumped. And I had a real moment where I had to say, what am I doing wrong as a coach? Because good coaching means you take ownership and responsibility over the safety and performance of your students. And it's not that I failed on teaching him how to throw a straight punch properly or, anything technical or complex motor skill. I failed him in terms of situational awareness, pre-contact cues, managing his ego enough not to put his hands up in fists by his face when someone's swearing at him. All of those things were a failure on my part. If I can tell people not to do it, but if we don't train it, I won't respond like that under stress. So,
and is that like listening to this? If I wasn't a martial artist or a self-defense expert, I could just be listening to you and going, duh, that's just common sense. We know that it's not common sense because we've got those douchebag fights every Friday and Saturday night at bars all over the world, right? And the 2020 hindsight thing, you step back and you go, yeah, well, of course he shouldn't have gotten in a stance. But two things come to mind, and then what I really want is you to tell me how. And it's interesting. I don't know if you've heard me quote or mention my friend Bob Willis. He's a world-renowned police researcher, expert witness, retired cop, and he wrote a legendary book in the law enforcement community called Street Survival, and it's encyclopedic. It's in every single police department. And he saw me teaching in 1993 at a American Society of Law Enforcement Trainers conference. And he comes up to me after my class and he says, "You teach the 2 seconds before the fight everyone else teaches." Mm-hmm. And what we're talking about there is self-awareness as it relates to situational awareness, being able to diffuse yourself, but understanding choice speech, understanding, all the emotional elements that change how we make decisions. And that's the whole cycle of behavior, understanding when you're in the fear loop and how to choose safety and so on and so forth. So if we go back to the story of your student, and I really appreciated, what you said was fantastic. A lot of instructors don't take emotional ownership over they take credit for the victories, but the failures are like, well, you shouldn't have been in a stance. Where maybe the real failure is if all of our drills always start, we agree to the drill's going to start 3, 2, 1, and then we get into a stance. We're Pavlovianly conditioning people to, hey, we're getting ready for a fight. We get in our stance, as opposed to understanding in our system, the relationship between choice speech, nonviolent postures, the whole Trojan horse metaphor, and how to threat discriminate while you're trying to morally and ethically and legally diffuse a confrontation. And I wanted to draw that out there because it occurred to me while you're listening, you're very eloquent and very passionate, but somebody who doesn't understand how like this the standard typical training goes in all styles. It's we start in the headlock. You're going to kick me. I'm going to practice this block. Let's start in position. They're not really looking at the scenario exploration. And I think that's really the missing link overall is understanding it from reverse engineering an actual scenario and then looking at, okay, what am I missing, from my arsenal?
And I think that for any Krav Maga instructors and practitioners, if you think about stress drills, right? And we take stress drills that we say, okay, we're trying to say you don't know who the bad guy is. There's one called Bad Neighborhood, right? And you're walking through the room, somebody's going to attack you. Maybe you don't know who it is. What's missing from that drill? We're not addressing pre-contact cues, right? Are any of the bad guys ever just approaching us randomly and then putting on the choke? There was nothing prior happening to that, or nothing that alerted us to suspicious behavior in terms of body posture, language, or energy. And there's a couple reasons it doesn't happen. Number one, we don't train it. So we're not learning how to get off the X right away.
Is this some of, let me interject here.
Yeah.
Because you're describing a lot of the stuff we do, and we always say spear's a bridge to your next move. There's a misunderstanding in our very, very, martial arts is almost like, Republicans and liberals, right? Like you've got sides and you got to pick. We can't get along together. And so there's like a thought out there that Blauer's anti-Krav, Blauer's anti this, and I'm not. I've only ever been about trying to make people safer. Our system is about physiology, physics, and psychology. It's about understanding the science of that violent encounter. And if you're a good Samaritan, if you're a first responder, if you're in the military, I want you to win. And I don't care if you win through avoidance, or if you're using a Wing Chun punch, or if you're using a Thai shin kick, or if you're doing a straight blast from Jeet Kune Do, or some classic Krav counter. What I'm trying to explain to people, and I like where you're going and what you see, but we're bringing I always use the term like fascia. We're like connective tissue. If you don't weather the ambush, if you're shitless or unconscious, it doesn't matter what was in your toolbox and who built your toolbox, whether it was a Japanese toolbox or a Korean toolbox or an Israeli toolbox, right? I mean, you tracking what I'm saying there?
Absolutely. And I think that the stress drill, I mean, just speaking from a Krav Maga perspective, the stress drills that we're utilizing demonstrate a few examples of where we need spear. And one is bad guy energy is generally bad.
Right.
Meaning, if I take a level 1 class, people who haven't been training for years, and then I ask them to act in a way that's a little bit creepy or say something rude, they're terrible. Right. And it's awkward and it doesn't feel real and it just feels very fake and it's difficult to create that. So we have to train our students how to be good bad guys.
Right. And that's something just for people listening to this. And you don't have to be a Krav Maga expert to listen to this podcast and get something out of it. You can be like in any martial art, any system, is just to recognize that quite literally it's been 37 years that I've been studying violence, and we're not trying to create a martial art or a style or a set of moves. What we're doing is kind of like, it's almost like what the old Richard Marcinko and the red cell concept of, we're going to evaluate and test your readiness and give you back your feedback. So we're more like consultants. And what I've done is studied psychology and emotion. I mean, our original 1980, my force on force drill was called the panic attack, right? And the reason why, and I was just talking about this on a podcast yesterday, where, what we used to do is we would take people and we would agree to what the characters were. So you would be a drunk outside of a bar, or you'd be the loan shark strongman, right? And then we'd say, okay, if I was the guy collecting money, would I do a round kick to the head to collect the money? Would I double leg the guy, or would I walk up to him and say, hey, the boss wants his money, right? And would we be super, super close? And we would discuss this. We would collaborate. So everyone in the class would be in there. And this is you probably never even heard this story, the original genesis of the whole panic attack and high gear system. And what we would do is we would say, okay, if I'm the loan sharks, like strong arm guy, I would come up and I would be this close to you, like as close as I am to the microphone, and go, the boss wants his money. And then if you stayed in role, you'd like, well, man, I don't have, obviously you didn't have any money. You were in a force-on-force scenario class. Hey, I need a little bit more time. So we'd stay in role. It would force us to get out of this, hey man, I don't have any money, right? And get into that fighting stance. It would force us to talk naturally, because that's where we're most vulnerable. That's where we're in the most danger. When somebody says you got the time and you look at your watch and they hit you, right? There's a distraction there. And so what we would do in the actual scenarios is we would agree to characters that would be present. You would know. So this was the emotional jack in the box. So imagine before the seminar, Katie, I'd say, okay, and everyone who attended these things, they weren't always my students. They was an open seminar. So we'd have boxers come in, Thai boxers come in, Krav, whoever, and everyone would identify by their style. And I would say things like this: if somebody threw a haymaker at you or a headbutt or grabbed you, what would you do? And they would say, so if I asked a judo player, what would you do if I grabbed you in a bear hug? He would give me a judo answer, correct? Do you get that? Right? If I said, if I grabbed you, Katie, what would you do? If you hadn't been exposed to startle, flinch, convert, spear, closest weapon, closest target, and ECT and all that stuff, you would give me a Krav answer.
Right.
That's your strongest background for self-defense. And I need people to understand this when we talk about the categories, is the brain attaches to things it likes, right? You like your car, you picked it because it resonates with your personality. Krav resonates with your personality. Jiu-jitsu resonates with somebody else's personality. And that's why and so the risk and the danger that I want, and this has been my mission for decades, is that when I say careful you practice, you might get really good at the wrong thing. People interpret that as a negative thing. What I'm looking at there is like if all you know how to do is strike, and suddenly you're on the ground, right? The chance of you panicking and losing it, you need to be well-rounded, but we need to have a more of a 30,000 foot view. And you alluded to this early on when you said you felt like you failed your student because you didn't really teach him about situational awareness. You didn't teach him about nonviolent postures. You didn't teach him about checking his ego and choosing safety, as we say. Like, how do you choose safety? And so if you're always, if we use the metaphor, the thing of like, all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? If all we're doing is striking and getting out, then the fight starts on D3, what we call the defend page. And that's where place. And that's where most everybody starts their training. We in class, we ceremoniously say, hey, like, avoid violence, avoid danger, be nice until it's time to not be nice. Okay, let's fight, right? And then the rest of the class is physically fighting. So let me just because I'm rambling here, but this is such a cool thing. So in the early 80s, I would have somebody come in and I would say, what would you do if? Because this is before I used the term PIA, primary initiation attack. But I would say the attackers can only do headbutt, haymaker, tackle, just those initial ones. And what we did is we put everyone in character. And we'd say, as a role player, good guy, you need to be in character, right? You're inside a gym, but really you're pretending you're at a bus stop or you're in a bar. And then the aggressor, and we didn't have high gear back then. It was like Frankenstein equipment. We had the super safe helmet from Japan. We had Taekwondo chest guard. We had hockey gauntlets on. We had no gear. So, just dressed up. But then someone would come in and instead of getting into a stance, it'd be like, hey, boss wants his money. I need another week. I got to do something to you. No, come on. And we get in this conversation and then the person would go whap and hit. And what was interesting is because you didn't know who the character was going to be, that gave you a fear spike. Your physiology changed your breathing. You change your breathing, you change how you think. Then you didn't know if the guy was going to do a violent shove, a haymaker, or headbutt. So, and because you weren't in your fighting stance, like checking distance and watching for stuff, and you're just hanging out here in like these impromptu nonviolent postures, and this action is faster than reaction. In an ambush, who's action? The bad guy. So at the distance of like 1.5 feet away, talking to somebody, if someone goes to smack you in the face and bitch slap you and go, the boss wants his money, you're going to get hit. And what was interesting and why we called it the panic attack is because nobody, regardless of their system, did what they said they were going to do in the introduction. Hey, I'm a boxer. If somebody did that, I would bob and weave and hit him with a liver shot. Right? Mm-hmm. The Thai guy, no, I would just get in a clinch and I would just do that. When I forced them to be a human being in a scenario and they agreed to the rules of conduct, all of the complex motor skill stuff went out the window. It was this is like 20 years before the term social experiment. But we started getting people from all over, just coming to these seminars to just experience that. But the takeaway was, excuse me. The takeaway was there's a fight before the fight you all practice. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah. So this was the actual genesis of the whole high gear system and reverse engineering stuff. And now it ties, and I look back, so that's 1980. How many years ago was that? 38?
Right.
Is that good math? 38? Something like that. And so that's 38 years ago. And now only 38 years, I wish I'd come up with this earlier, where we talk about the categories. And depending on the category you're in, and all it is a reference point to help explain how the brain learns and how the brain stores information, and how when you decide to do something, you will specifically reach for what you've trained and practiced. And that might cause this delay. And I'm explaining this here because this is what happened to your student. Mm. Is, when the guy challenged him and he was outside, he went right to, okay, we're going to fight. And what did he do for years in the gym when you're getting ready to punch, block, kick, strike? You put your hands up, right? So it's that Pavlovian response, and I want to get back to this idea that what we're trying to do is make you safer as an instructor, make your students safer, and recognize that what we're doing is we're bringing that connective tissue. And I guess I'll just put you on the spot here. Is that when you started training with us, what were did you like these immediate little moments like, oh my God, I could use this here, or was it like, yeah, we just start here, but like they're starting like 3 steps back? That's interesting. How does that work?
Yeah, bringing it. There were a couple of key points that really set me going on how much better I could make my program and how much safer I could make my students, and touching back on that idea of altercations not happening inside a vacuum, right? Like all of a sudden there's just a choke coming on. Like, shouldn't there be some sort of setup or some sort of, precursor, pre-contact cue, something that being trained students to be aware of so they can deal? If we're all agreeing, I've heard this in instructor certifications in Krav Maga, the verbiage is a little bit different, but essentially, most people are part of the social contract, right? There's 3%ers, so that leaves 97% of the population that is part of the social contract. So if we're not ever training our students to de-escalate when they're not dealing with a true asocial predator, then we're doing them a disservice. And then if we're not equipping them to handle the beginning of an altercation emotionally, verbally, mentally, they're not as safe as they could be, and I would run drills that I felt like, hey, the idea was really good. And this was prior to my exposure to any of Spear's system. Like I said earlier, the one we called Bad Neighborhood. And I would go, gosh, it just feels so fake. and I hated it because I get one person to walk to the other side of the room, and I like the idea, hey, you don't know who the bad guy is, right? You don't know who's going to attack you. But then you'd have a student just walk up behind him and choke him. And I was like, there's nothing that came up before that. It just doesn't feel real. And then somebody else comes and goes, hey, and chokes them. I wanted it to be more like real life. And what I have gained is an ability to separate out and train my students to be more realistic bad guys, to create scenarios that feel a little bit more real. And it pops up in a couple of places, not just that drill where it's occurring inside a vacuum, but also once we start adding verbal abuse into drills too. I'll have students that they'll kill a pad, they'll kill a technique, but the second that you get in their face and start swearing at them, just complete shutdown. And in particular, a lot of my female students, just emotionally close off and freeze. And that's crazy. You're saying you could deal with someone putting hands around your throat and squeezing, but you can't deal with someone calling you a bitch.
Right. Interesting, right?
That's absurd, right? So that meant that they weren't really emotionally equipped to handle it. So how do I address that other than, just having them sprinkle it in on a stress drill, really on a deep level, doing drills like ECT, doing drills where we're creating a pre-contact cue in the beginning of an altercation that they have to manage themselves and they have to manage verbally the bad guy. That changed a lot in my program, and people love it. Of course we're all doing this because we want to make humans safer, but I understand that a lot of people who run gyms and run programs, they have businesses to run. I have created a dynamic where my students get to participate in my PDR classes.
Nice.
So it is a desirable thing that they want to be able to do, because on this Saturday, we're going to take a 2-ish hours and we put on high gear and we're going to run scenarios, and you're going to run through things like ECT, and you're going to run through the beginnings of the altercation, and they love it. Because
what's their I mean, you can tell by their face, their smile, their confidence changes that they love it. But are you getting specific feedback from them?
Yeah. They ask me when I'm going to have another one. So I've limited for myself that they have to be a level 2 or above student in Krav Maga, or they have to have attended the BYOB.
Nice.
So, that way they're not just someone in off the street who has no familiarity with what we're trying to do at all. And I know them, and I've worked with them for a little bit longer, so I can kind of, make sure that they're getting the most out of it. And it makes people go, when can I test? And when is there another BYOB? Because I want to be able to go to the scenario training class.
That's awesome. It's interesting because a lot of people think that all our system is finger splayed outside 90 and hitting with your forearm. So like a lot of people, their judgment is like, we use our forearms. That's just a block. We're just using our forearms. That's the weaponizing the startle flinch from a physiological, psychological, biomechanic level is life-saving, because that's like the equivalent of an airbag in the car, right? The sudden attack in the street is like a sudden car accident. What saves you in the car accident isn't your driving, right? And it's not necessarily the model of your car, whether you're in a Prius or a Ford or a Mustang, although size does matter, right? So, but what saves you in a true accident is an airbag. And so we tell people, like, this is the human weapon system. This is that connection there, that if you embrace this startle flinch and learn how to weaponize it, what you're doing is optimizing this organic airbag moment, right? The hands come up, you get push away danger. That creates workspace. Can I drop a knee or an elbow in? Can I gouge the eyes? Can I continue core to extremity, just push that person away, break contact and run? And what we're talking about is being able to protect yourself in a true asocial sudden ambush. And it would just make everybody safer. But I still scratch my head sometimes, like when I'll hear people go, why is he teaching people how to flinch? Why would you want to flinch? Like, you already know how to flinch. We're not teaching you how to flinch. We're teaching you how to convert the flinch. We're teaching you how to go from potential energy to kinetic energy, and how to express power using functional biomechanics that are hardwired, like part of your DNA. So it makes everyone safer sooner. But as important as understanding the organic airbag metaphor is, what's deeper and more important is the stuff we do on the mind and your emotional psychological arsenal. Like that's like that's why your students, as much fun as doing the scenarios and high gear is, and they go, hey, when can I do this? Well, you got to test and get this in here. What they're getting through osmosis and deliberate teaching is a skill set on how to manage life. It's not just, and I always say this, like, hey, like understanding fear and managing fear and understanding how to navigate like the thoughts and we all have voices in our head, right? Don't go to class today. Go to class today. Oh shit, I got this guy. He's so much bigger. How come I partnered up with this person? Ow, that hurt. I'm a pussy, right? These are like, and hopefully it's not just me that has those voices in my head, right? But it's knowing how to understand, okay, I'm in the fear loop now. I need to get out of the fear loop. I need to have a goal here. I need to have a plan here. Act and actor need to become one, right? And so the biggest reward when I'm teaching and my team is teaching is I remind them, like, we're not just teaching people the spear. We're teaching people a skill set that makes them a better mother, father, a husband, wife, human, because our ability to look at fear and things that scare us and manage that fear determines the quality of our day and therefore the quality of our week, month, and life. Right. And to me, that's the biggest thing when people go through a true spear system PDR experience is getting everything about that whole cycle of behavior, why you will fight, the 3 Ps, and then teaching people like the formula that we use, because I believe that the ability to protect yourself or a loved one is inarguably the most important skill that anyone can have. And people will argue, if they don't think about that deeply, they'll go, no, this skill's more important. This skill's more important. I tell people, like, if you look at random violence, whether it's a rape, a murder, an active shooter, something, in that moment, that person who's being victimized would do anything to get out of that situation. And our ability to protect ourselves is the only skill set where no other subject matter expert can come to our rescue, right? Like, you're getting jumped. You do not have time to dial 911, let alone 911, right? Every other problem in life, you can call a subject matter expert. Did you get that? If you have a toothache, you could do it yourself. YouTube, how to drill a tooth, how to pull a tooth. But you go to a dentist, your roof is leaking. You can do it yourself, but you call roof repair. Car problem. There's only one scenario in life where you need to take care of it yourself, and that is somebody is on you right now. And while that happens so infrequently, when it does happen, it's 100% of your day and your life right then. And that's why I say it's inarguably the most important skill that anyone could have. But once you learn that skill, and this is the exciting part, by teaching people detect, diffuse, defend, you can apply that to your business. You can apply that to your relationship. You can apply that to, how you make decisions during the day. Okay, do I have any situational awareness about this? How am I talking about this? Am I positive going into this? Am I negative going into this? Oh, wait a minute, I'm in the fear loop. And then the defend part, is a metaphor for how am I going to execute the best strategy to buy this new business, ask this woman out on a date, ask this person to marry me, ask my boss for a raise. It's all, that's, to me, this kind of went from learning self-defense to, I look at everything in life as a metaphor for self-defense. Right. So,
well, and I, I just want to speak on that from a personal level. Obviously I agree with you on a self-defense being important aspect. It's my, career and life mission and what I just want to do with myself is to try to help people be safer. But I can speak on that mental aspect. Yeah, that is what the students are getting and why they're excited about it and how it does translate. You're familiar with my situation, but not everybody is. And so I can directly relate what we have done in terms of cycle of behavior and fear management in terms of like outside of the gym or outside of violent encounters. I have a 3-year-old son, and when and he was diagnosed with autism. When it happened, in hindsight, maybe I was so deeply in denial that I couldn't see it. But I think part of it is that, your kid is perfect to you. And so he's just awesome. He's a quirky little dude and he doesn't talk a lot, And so when it happened, when, he got the initial diagnosis, and I'm going, oh my God, a lot of these things really fit. And I tried to be as immediately as proactive as possible, at my entire day. And every spare moment that I was not teaching a class was spent researching and making appointments and doing everything I thought I could do. But I wasn't managing myself emotionally. So I was acting and I was doing things. I was on the duress path. And I booked all the appointments. I made all the things, right? But I remember like probably about a week after the initial diagnosis, and all of this takes a very long time, I sat there in an observation for a social skills class for children on the spectrum. And I started having a panic attack because I looked at these other kids and thought, then they have these behaviors that are very typical of children on the spectrum, the hand flapping or spinning and self-stimulatory, auditory sensitivities, just really like inappropriate social boundaries. And I'm going, my kid doesn't belong here. And, I was freaking out, trying to hold it in and be really stoic, but not doing a very good job. And in that moment, I thought, what am I afraid of right now? Because if I'm going to be totally honest with myself, my kid does belong here and he needs help with all of these things, right? So what am I scared of? I'm scared that he's not going to live some happy, successful life. Like, he can't do that if he like moves his arms weird. Am I afraid that he's like not going to grow up and get married and have a fulfilling relationship? Because statistically, like 9% of people on the spectrum get married. I mean, what does that mean? Plenty of people, who's to say you're going to get married anyway, spectrum or not? False evidence appearing real, false expectations appearing real. So I'm not scared because my kid is the exact same person he was prior to the diagnosis, and I love him and I'm insane about him, and he is the happiest person I've ever met in my life. What my job is to provide him with the support that he needs so he can live the most fulfilling, functional, happy life he can. Accept what's happening, get challenged, keep thinking. Mm-hmm. All of those things really came back to me. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional.
That's okay.
It was such a beautiful thing to be able to take this thing that I do to try to make people feel good about their lives and empowered and safer, and say, nothing is more important to me than my kid. And now I can apply this to being the best mom. And it really has made a huge difference. It's a very relatively recent development in my life. And, I've had a lot of very supportive feedback from developmental pediatricians and ABA therapists and, everyone who's in this community who's like, holy crap, you have done a lot given the amount of time of the diagnosis. And I'm going, right, because I was able to manage my feelings, right? It's not that any other parent doesn't love their kid or doesn't have access to the internet, right? It's that they couldn't manage their emotions enough to act in a way that was going to get them the results that they needed. And I keep doing it. And I keep checking back with myself and making sure ACT, right? Cycle of behavior. And you know, I know we've talked about it in private, but I just think it's so special, and it really has made a big difference in my life, you know. And so I want to pay that forward, and I want to give that skill set to other people.
That's amazing, and thank you for being honest and vulnerable live here. You know, it's hard to talk about that stuff, and but it's so cool, and it you know, I don't want to overemphasize or simplify the power of understanding fear and how it either throttles or it's cathartic. It's how you look at it, and that's the bigger mission behind the whole thing. Is, you know, we found each other because of my relationship with Kirian and his respect for, you know, my research and how he's shared it with his whole family, and I live vicariously through him because he's built like such an amazing family, and you're such an amazing person and coach, and you can just hear it in your voice, and that's what we want. We want people to like I abhor violence. I'm sickened by violence, and it's why our system is so behaviorally based, and why it's got all this other. And I would love, you know, people to understand that you know, we're more than just a forearm, and your story just now is evidence of that. I've used the cycle behavior, you know, myself, my kids. When I remember Nick having to have an operation when he's really young, and there was risk of, you know, him getting put under at his age, and there was serious risk. And I was freaking out. I mean, I was like borderline, okay, I'm going to have a panic attack. Like, I'm like, and then just, and what I did, I actually did the ballistic microfight reverse engineer model. I went to the hospital, walked the scenario, took him, walked him through it, just like doing like the slow motion, like when we're setting up a scenario. And the whole time in there, I'm going, you're in the fear loop. You need to go here. And I share this here just to piggyback on your story, that like having a map to understand the neural circuitry of fear has helped me. Right? It doesn't matter who you are. You don't get to the point where you go, oh, now I'm trained, I have no fear. Right? And that's our big play on words, is there's no such thing as no fear. There's only KNOW fear. Get to know fear. And if you learn to look at it, it can transform your life. And it doesn't mean like you feel good about any of this stuff.
Right.
But it's okay, I've got to do this now. Oh, I have self-awareness. Look at this. I'm breathing erratically. I'm sweating. I'm a little bit nervous. Okay, I'm going to get my breathing under control, because that'll help get my mind under control. And I know where I am. I'm not lost. I'm in the fear loop. Right. I got to get out that challenge or threaten door and start moving. So your students are really, really lucky. And Kirian is super, super fortunate, because you're a special person, and I'm glad that we met, and I'm glad that you're sharing our content. We'll continue to do great things together and make people safer collectively. I know that that's the mission, and I got nothing to add to that. Just excited that we connected, and we're doing things, and we want to attract more people who have a similar passion and mission. That this can't be macho. This can't be, you know, yeah, I'll just punch him in the face, I'll kick him. It's always choose safety. And as the world continues to, and people think I'm like exaggerating statistics. I like, I tell people, hey, the world's getting more and more violent because it's getting more and more populated, and there's less and less boundaries, right? And I'll always have somebody who'll post on there going, statistically, we're in the safest period. I'm going, I don't believe those statistics, for a moment. But again, it's not about being paranoid. It's about being prepared and doing the best you can just to be a good human and get through shit. Katie, thank you so much for your time. And you have anything you want to close with?
I appreciate you. Thank you a lot. So thanks for all of the research and all of the work. It's changing people's lives and it did mine. So we're going to keep fighting the good fight.
You're great, Katie. Thank you, sweetie.
All right. I'll talk to you.
I'll speak to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.